Welcome back to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. I'm your host, Jill, time management strategist, author, and award-winning speaker, and advocate for all things growth in motherhood. A really quick reminder that you can also catch this episode on YouTube and see the conversation that I'm having with Amanda live and in action over there. So Amanda Quick is my guest today. She is an international best-selling author. She's a TEDx speaker, and she's a trauma advocate. Through her work, Amanda empowers others to reclaim their voice and heal by writing and speaking their story to the world. Her own journey of overcoming and embracing the healing power of storytelling inspires others to create meaningful change in their lives, in their children's lives, and in the world. I'm really excited to have you on the show, Amanda. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's going to be such a fun, interesting, wise conversation, I feel today. And I love the work that you're doing. And I would love if you can share a little bit about, gosh, I mean, sort of where this all came from, as much as your story as you want to share.
Yeah.
Give us some background in terms of how this healing and storytelling and advocation work came through for you.
Yeah. So it all began in 2016 for me. I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. I had very young kids. They were 1, 4, and 5. Totally immersed in new motherhood. And one night my husband didn't come home from work and I couldn't find him. And eventually I found him. He had been arrested. He was in jail. And the arrest was for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond.
Yikes.
And I about dropped the phone. What the ever loving does this mean? I was in so much shock. I didn't believe it was true. Like they have the wrong person or there's some other explanation. That's how far outside of it, my reality that was. And eventually I learned there was a sting operation and he showed up to purchase 2 children, ages 11 and 14. And he left the scene of the crime because they asked for money up front, and that's just not how it's done. But he was arrested after the fact, and his side of the story was different. His side of the story was that he had been soliciting adults his entire life, which was news to me. So he's admitting to, cheating on me all this time, but he would never do that. He was trying to find out if it was real and yada, yada, yada. And I so desperately was in disbelief in the first place, let alone trying to hold myself together, keep my family together. Again, stay-at-home mom, no income, no nothing. I tried to believe him. And I really, really tried to hold on to that for a long time because this wasn't the person that I knew. This wasn't the person I am, all the things that I had attached to that. And I just kept telling myself that my kids need both parents and he's better if I'm with him. And so I have no choice. And I really believed that. And I knew that in a lot of ways he was better with me because at least I knew what was going on. He was more stable. His mental health was better because he had some support. And if I left, I knew that would go away and things would deteriorate. But I was terrified of any of that. And so I got him through the criminal proceedings and I did what I could to support, visitation with the kids and that sort of thing. And, what everybody's usually surprised about here is that he was offered a plea deal, never went to jail. His plea deal was only 4 years of probation and he had to register as a sex offender. He would be a felon, but he also would retain his constitutional right to parent because at least in the US, most of the states, you do not lose your parental rights just because you're charged with a felony sex offense. And it's a lot. We could debate about that one for a while, but the time I was grateful because we could try to put the family back together, or so I thought. But his mental health did in fact continue deteriorating. Even as we were together, he was exposed in a lot of ways and he could not work. Eventually I went back to work and I started to finally realize how not okay I was as I was separating myself for 8 hours a day from this situation. And I started to finally be able to process little pieces of what he even was admitting to. Wasn't ready to go down what he wasn't admitting to yet, but was starting to process some of it and realizing how not okay I was in the marriage. And yet in my mind, that was a me problem because again, all of my beliefs about what my kids need and they need their father and And I was raised by a single mom and I wasn't allowed to see my father. So I was carrying all of my childhood trauma here with me and all of the beliefs that I created around that. And things escalated in a lot of ways. His mental health got worse. The more I pulled away, the worse it got, which, was proving my point and making me feel incredibly guilty. And yet I didn't know what else to do. And eventually it got to the point he filed for divorce because I had separated and he was trying to get me to come back. He was actually using it as a manipulation tactic because he knew how badly I wanted to keep the kids' lives together. So if he filed for divorce, maybe I would come back to him. Didn't work. um, and things started to become high conflict, and they started to be literally like negotiations between child exchanges. And I hired all of the specialists I could think of. I hired the lawyers. I tried to figure out how do I put this together. He's felony sex offender on probation. He's not allowed on play dates or around the kids' schools, but he's allowed to be around them. All of the things. He tried to remove me from the house. I mean, it got bad. And I think a lot of people think that the rock bottom was the arrest, but the rock bottom for me was actually after I saw my own children start to be sexually groomed by their father. And I started to be hit with this, oh, right, the guy who was trying to purchase children is dangerous around his own kids. Like, hello, how did you not see that? And obviously I couldn't see it at the time. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And everything in my body wanted me to take my kids and leave the country, but you can't do that. That's considered a kidnapping. And so I had to figure out how to get out of the situation because now I'm in a high conflict divorce and you cannot make new accusations. And so this was my rock bottom because I'm having to hand over my kids to somebody who is very dangerous and there doesn't appear to be anything that I can actually do about it. That's the story, right? That's the story that I'm being told and telling myself because of the choices that I made. This is the consequence. And therefore my kids are suffering because of, my choices, his choices, etc. And I truly felt like I couldn't go on. Like, I can't live like this. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was having panic attacks. I mean, it was the whole thing. And I was still working full time and trying to do all the things. And I was in therapy, just trying to work through all of it. Everybody's just this doesn't make sense. And it was actually my therapist who suggested that I go see a psychic. Now, I'm not remotely on that train. I'm agnostic. Like, you want me to see a fortune teller? Like, what? But okay, I'll try because nobody else is helping me. And I went to go see this lady and I was trying to keep an open mind. Not sure what I thought, but it can make it worse. And so I go in and she's telling me about this past life of mine. She's talking about her gifts and all these things. And she's telling me about the scene where I was married to him 500 years ago and he was physically abusive and things were okay until the kids came. And like, she started describing our relationship in this interesting way. And I started to see some parallels and I was like, okay, I'm listening. I'm trying to be open here. I'm listening. And then she started talking about all the reasons I didn't leave. And it was like she was in my head because it was all of the justifications I had been giving myself this whole time. And I'm like, okay. And then she tells me that in that life, he beat me to death. And I fell down the stairs in front of my kids and was laying there dying. And as she's saying this, my whole body has this response. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. Still don't know what to do about it. And then she says, that fear that you're feeling right now, you need to get a handle on that fear because that's not this life anymore. And your body is having this reaction to him because I was terrified of him. Didn't lay a hand on me, very mentally and emotionally abusive, very gaslighty, would literally be stalking me, walking up and down the street, but nothing ever actually happened. I was just, my body was very scared of him. She said, you got to get a handle of that fear. You are living in a different time. You have choices you need to make. You are people that can help you. And I was like, I have done the things. I've hired the people. I've done, like, what do you mean? She said, the reason you are sitting here in this chair, and I don't know if it's because of the way that I was open, I was listening, but the way that she said this to me is exactly what I needed to hear in that time. She said, the reason you're sitting in this chair right now is because you actually have not chosen. I'm choosing. She says, no, you actually have not chosen to be done with him once and for all, this lifetime and any other. And in that moment, I saw myself clearly for the first time. I saw that she was right. there was a part of me that still wanted my marriage, still wanted my husband, in that previous life, because that was the thing I knew and wanted. There was a part of me that didn't want any of this, that wanted to go back, that wanted to believe that there was still another explanation. I wanted to believe there was healing on the other side, that somehow we could overcome this. And I saw it. And I finally saw that she was not wrong, that I had not chosen. And I was, in fact, choosing to continue this shenanigans. And she said, "You need to choose." And I stood up and I said, "I'm done." She's like, "Say it like you mean it." "I'm done." She says, "Okay, I can help you." I'm like, "Okay, what do I need to do now?" Like, I get it. I get it. I get it. And I could feel this choice was basically, am I choosing the path where I'm essentially going to end up killing myself in some fashion, or am I choosing to be done with this pattern? And so what she said, everybody knows somebody, and you've got to keep asking, you've got to keep trying, you've got to stop hiding, because I hired everybody, but I wasn't exactly telling everybody about what was happening because I was holding a lot of shame. I was creating his offense was mine, essentially. And I was carrying the burdens of what he had done as my own. And so it was exactly the same day after I left that session that I went back to work. And all of a sudden, there was doors open that weren't open before. Coworkers said, "I actually know somebody. Let me call them." I got a hold of Homeland Security. I got in touch with the arresting officers that arrested him in 2016. The district attorney unsealed the case file for me. I actually got the details of the original case because the family members don't get criminal case files. I got all of this information. I started recording my kids. They started disclosing things, which was not easy, but it was more and more data. And I had 6 weeks to collect everything because our final divorce hearing was 6 weeks after that. And so I had such a short period of time, and yet it felt like I just had to keep going. And I literally changed the story. And this is where the conversation about storytelling comes in. The story I was telling myself before was that I didn't have a choice, that this was happening to me, that my lawyers were supposed to sort this out, that there was nothing I can do, all of that, to every time something doesn't work, I need more data and I have to keep going. This is going to happen because I'm making it happen. I am not choosing to participate in that. I'm choosing to participate in this. And the story in my head changed. The beliefs I had about what was happening changed. And that 6 week period, I collected a 3-inch binder worth of data and evidence, and we took it to court, and I faced him in court. And everything that couldn't come through the previous things came through me and the things my kids said, all of it to the judge. The judge was appalled by quite a bit. She took a couple days to make her ruling. And in her ruling, she did actually give him one last chance to get the therapies and the disclosures and everything else, but immediately removed overnight. She took the safety piece seriously, and she gave him 6 weeks to comply with a very large list because he had not done a single thing the court had asked of him. And I think on some level, she knew he was incapable, but they still have their statutes to follow. And so she left it up to him. If you want to have custody and visitation with your children, you will do the things that I am asking. And if you don't, then you won't. And he did not a single thing on the list. The 6 weeks went by, and the permanent order was then supervised visitation only, and he has never exercised it. And so March of 2020, 2 weeks before before the pandemic hit, was my divorce, unbeknownst to me what was coming. And April of 2020 was the last time we heard from him. And so that big story was such a loud thing that I needed to share in the world. And I realized I was not the only person in these situations, but the amount of shame and judgment that so many people and myself carried made it impossible for people to speak out. And so I've really made it my mission, in a sense, to help change that.
Wow. What a brave thing that you are doing. I mean, there aren't even words to be able to describe what it feels like to hear that story. And so I know that none of us listening can even imagine what it felt like to be going through that. Um, but I want to just thank you for the vulnerability and the rawness and the authenticity and sharing that, and um, just give you so much love. Just give you so
Thank you.
much love because that's unimaginable. And the fact that you were navigating your own career at the same time and your own parenting journey, like that's more than That's more than we can handle. And I would love to know sort of post, now it's 2024 as we're
Mhm.
recording this. What does life look like now for you?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I feel like it's more than we can handle, and yet that's it's kind of what life is in a lot of ways. Like, just because things happen to us doesn't mean we get to stop working or we get to stop parenting. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work like that. And part of, a lot of what I work through today is the day to day still, while external things happen. And I have a different set of tools now than I did back then. But life doesn't stop lifing.
Right.
And, especially in this world. So 4 years later, I I do have a full-time job. I also have a business because my goal is to I have a book published. I've given a TEDx talk. So those are really exciting things that I've done to share my story. And my goal is to actually reach other moms with big stories and help them process those big shame, guilt, fear emotions so that they can come and share their stories, whether they want to write or speak their story as well. And so that's what I'm kind of stepping into. But this last 4 years was a lot of diving deeper into the spirituality, because I'm now much more like, okay, there's something to this. I need to understand. I dive deep into the way that our physical body is reacting and responding to our mental and emotional and spiritual bodies, and the way all of this is interconnected. And mental health is not just a mental health thing, it's a mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health thing. And how we can look at those, like, not just past life patterns, but childhood patterns and the stories and where they came from, and how we can unpack those so that we can take a look at our lives and do we actually want to be making these decisions. And so I do a lot of work around that. I also have been, I got remarried a couple of years ago and we just separated. So life doesn't stop lifing, but it was actually really healing, both marriage and divorce, in a lot of ways, because it was not high conflict. It was a loving separation. It was a realization that we were on different paths. And instead of trying harder and building resentment and not liking each other, we actually were able to separate very lovingly. And that was really healing after a very high conflict, 18 months long, $75,000 divorce the last time. And we can remain friends and, operate differently. And so who I am today is a very different person from 4 years ago. I approach life's challenges very differently. I don't go into full shock. I stay in my I feel raw, and I actually feel very raw today because of everything happening externally around us in the world right now. But I'm in that in a different way. I don't shut it off. I don't refuse to look at it. I don't wait 18 months or whatever till it bubbles up in my body and I ignore it. And I'm much more present with myself, and I'm much more present with my kids. And I listen to them differently and I work with them differently. And, I have all the things that I still desire to bring out into the world, but I do it from such a different place. I think sometimes, so many times we go through big things and we get through it, and then we go back to life. Like, I can't quite go do the same things anymore. And it has to me, it's this gift I was given so that I can share it and so that I can support other people. And that makes it all worthwhile in a very different way.
Yeah, the word that came to mind when you were sharing about how you've gone through another sort of life cycle of relationship and it was a healing reality for you and such a
Mhm.
different one than your first experience. That in itself feels like a gift, right? To be
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
go through full circle again and experience that in a completely different way and know that you've done that healing work. And I'm sure it never ends. And I know that for all of us, there's always more to process and uncover. We are like onions, we peel the layers. Like they call it the work because it is hard, continual work that is never
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Um, but wow, to see the transformation that can be possible, like that's so inspiring. And I'm sure I'm like, it's hard as an interviewer in these types of situations, right? Because you've heard it all. Like you've been on big stages and you've had the
I have.
opportunity to share and to have people's reactions to you all the time. And so um there's really nothing that I can contribute that would be new to you. However, Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to share something with the audience before they sign off, because I know everyone who started listening is literally still listening, which doesn't happen every episode, but they are today. And I'd love if there's something on your heart that you feel called to sort of share, a piece of information that you want to make sure everyone knows, or just anything that feels important to share before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think the thing that's on my heart right now is, with all of the chaos in the world, all of the external circumstances, all of the gun violence in schools, all of the wars in the other parts in the economy, and just the everything that is happening. I find, for me, when I come back to my center and I come back to who I am and what's important to me, it always, for me, is grounded in being a mom and being connected to my kids. Every single full circle moment for me in my life comes back to home inside of me and home with my boys. And I have had more of that recently, more of those feelings of it's me and them again, as it should be. And when I'm there and when I'm connected to them, my intuition is at its highest. Mom's intuition is real. And we know our kids best, and we know what feels good and what doesn't in our bodies in a way that we don't always have language for, understanding, or logic. And I feel like what's really important to share is reminding moms to really lean into that. If something doesn't feel right in your body, especially related to your kids, because that's our closest, deepest connection, listen to it. Really lean in and listen and trust your mom instincts and your mom knowings, whether it's advocating for your kids, whether it's school selection, whether it's whatever it is, whatever challenges they're going through. Lean into that knowing that you know your kids best, and that your body and your mind and everything is deeply connected to that, and really trust your mom heart.
Hmm. Yeah, amen to that. That is something that we need to trust because, like you said, it is real. It is so real. And we just need to sometimes get quiet so we can hear that little voice, right? And
Exactly.
practice trusting it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have a feeling that people are going to want to go get your book and they're
Yes.
going to want to listen to your podcast and just
Okay.
learn more from you. Can you share how people can stay connected with you and keep learning?
Absolutely. So my book is called The Sex Trafficker's Wife. You can get it Amazon. Sextraffickerswife.com has all of the links. My podcast, I am just kind of launching. It's called Awakened Motherhood. I'm just this week actually launching the first 3 episodes, and I'm starting getting the interviews out there as well, which is very exciting. And it's focused on other stories of moms going through things, and what happened in their lives that created the person they are. And so lifting up more than just the things I've been through. I really want to show people and showcase the power that moms have to really step into that place where we are awake and connected to ourselves and our kids. And then my other website is amandaquickhealing.com. And so that has other ways you can work with me. And you can also find me on social media, Amanda Quick Healing or The Sex Trafficker's Wife.
Amazing. And we'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes for people. But thank you again so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.